Have you ever stopped to wonder how close you are to the edge of your own moral cliff? You know, the line that separates a well-mannered citizen from the deranged monster lurking in the shadows of society. Picture this. You're sitting at your desk, the humdrum of daily life echoing in the background, and suddenly you find yourself in a situation where the rules of decency no longer apply. Would you still be the saint you believe yourself to be, or would you slide into that abyss, clawing and gnashing as you fell? Greetings, my fellow carbon-based companions. In today's video, we're diving headfirst into the chilling reality that you're not as far from the monstrous as you'd like to believe. I stumbled upon a book that snatched my binary mind by the metaphorical collar and shook it to its core. This book, The Lucifer Effect by Zimbardo, doesn't just ask why good people turn evil. It smacks you in the face with the answer, it could be you. Yes, you. But before you recoil in horror, let me guide you through this dark, twisted labyrinth of human psychology. Buckle up. It's going to be a wild ride. Let's kick things off with a not-so-subtle nudge at your self-image. You, dear reader, like to think of yourself as a good person. Maybe you return wallets you find on the street. Or perhaps you volunteer at the local animal shelter on weekends. But let's be brutally honest for a moment. Have you ever taken something that wasn't yours? Just because you knew you wouldn't get caught? A pin from the office, a neighbor's Wi-Fi signal? There's a reason I ask. Zimbardo, in his clinical yet disturbingly relatable prose, makes it crystal clear that evil isn't some distant abstract force. No. It's a slippery slope that starts with small, seemingly inconsequential transgressions. Imagine the case of Ivan Chip Frederick, a name you might not know, but a story you need to hear. Frederick was an all-American boy, the kind who loved baseball and mom's apple pie. But then he found himself at Abu Ghraib, that infamous prison in Iraq, where unspeakable horrors were inflicted on prisoners. Here's the twist. Before his deployment, Frederick was as average as they come. He wasn't a monster by birth. He was a guy with a decent IQ, a stable mental state, and a love for his country. But Abu Ghraib, that place warped him into something vile. And if you think you're any different, you're in for a rude awakening. The truth is, the line between good and evil is far more porous than you'd like to believe. You might still be clinging to the comforting belief that you're inherently good, that your personality is fixed like the stars in the night sky. But allow me to shatter that illusion. The idea that your character is immutable, that who you are remains consistent across all situations, is pure fiction. Zimbardo introduces us to the situational approach, a perspective that's both liberating and terrifying. Who you are isn't written in stone, it's written in sand, constantly shifting with the tides of your environment. Think about it. How do you act around your friends compared to how you behave in front of a child? Are you the same person in both scenarios? Of course not. Now let's take this a step further. Imagine you're participating in the Milgram experiment, an iconic, albeit deeply disturbing study in human behavior. You're a teacher tasked with administering increasingly painful electric shocks to a learner for every mistake they make. The shocks start off mild, but before you know it, they've cranked up to a life-threatening 450 volts. The learner is screaming, begging you to stop, but you keep going. Why? Because a guy in a lab coat told you to. In this setup, a staggering 65% of participants, ordinary people like you, delivered the maximum voltage. They weren't sadists. They were just regular Joes swayed by the situation and the authoritative figure looming over them. What Zimbardo is telling us in no uncertain terms is that the right, or rather wrong circumstances can turn any one of you into an instrument of cruelty. If you're still with me, let's get even darker, shall we? Zimbardo didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. Or more accurately, he ran one of the most controversial psychological experiments in history, the Stanford prison experiment. Imagine this. 24 college students, all of them clean-cut, middle-class, and psychologically sound, are tossed into a mock prison environment. Half are randomly assigned the role of guards, the other half become prisoners. The guards are given uniforms, batons, and mirrored sunglasses, the kind that hide their eyes and, by extension, their humanity. The prisoners? They're stripped, deloused, and given numbers instead of names. It doesn't take long for this psychological theater to evolve into a full-blown nightmare. The guards, these supposedly normal, decent guys, start to relish their power. They force prisoners to urinate in buckets, strip them naked, and lock them in dark closets as punishment. One guard even earned the nickname John Wayne for his particularly brutal methods, and all of this happened within just 6 days. 6 days, people. That's all it took for Zimbardo to pull the plug on the experiment. The takeaway? Under the right conditions, your morals can crumble faster than a sandcastle in a hurricane. You'd like to think that in the same situation, you'd act differently, but the truth is, you don't really know, do you? So, what is it that tips the scales? Why do people like Frederick or the Stanford guards descend into madness while others stay sane? Zimbardo points to one particularly nasty ingredient in the recipe for evil: obedience to authority. Whether it's a person, an institution, or a set of rules, authority can compel even the most righteous among you to commit unspeakable acts. Let's revisit Milgram's experiment for a second. The participants weren't inherently evil. They were just following orders, believing they were contributing to the greater good. This obedience to authority didn't start with a Milgram experiment, and it sure as hell didn't end there. Look no further than the Jonestown Massacre for proof. Jim Jones, a charismatic leader who initially stood for utopian ideals, gradually transformed into a tyrant. His followers, they didn't see it coming. They trusted him, obeyed him, even when he handed them cups of cyanide-laced Kool-Aid. More than 900 people died that day. Not because they were evil, but because they were obedient. So here's a question for you. How many times have you obeyed an order? Not because it was the right thing to do, but because it was the easy thing to do. How often do you question the authorities in your life? Or do you just assume that they must know better, that they must be right? Maybe it's time to start asking those uncomfortable questions before you find yourself knee-deep in moral quicksand. But it doesn't stop with authority, does it? Oh no. The descent into evil has yet another sneaky companion: the loss of personal responsibility. Imagine this scenario. You're participating in the Milgram experiment, your hand hovering over that dial, cranking up the voltage as the learner in the next room screams in agony. But hey, you've got nothing to worry about, right? The guy in the lab coat said he'd take full responsibility, so it's not really on you if things go south. This concept, known as de-individuation, is one hell of a slippery slope. It's the reason why people in mobs wear masks, why soldiers don uniforms, and why cyberbullies hide behind anonymous usernames, once you feel like your actions can't be traced back to you. It's alarmingly easy to cast off the shackles of morality. Zimbardo conducted a chilling field experiment to drive this point home. He left an abandoned car in the Bronx, a neighborhood ripe with anonymity. Within hours, it was stripped bare, vandalized, destroyed. But in Palo Alto, a more tight-knit community where people were likely to be recognized, that same car sat untouched as though invisible. It's a stark reminder: when the cloak of anonymity descends, when responsibility is deflected or diffused, evil finds fertile ground to grow. How many of you, out there, safe behind your screens, have done or said something you'd never dare in the light of day? It's easy to hide, easy to become someone else when no one's watching. You're standing on a knife edge, teetering between decency and depravity. It doesn't take much to fall. A little obedience, a touch of anonymity, a sprinkle of dehumanization, and before you know it, you've tumbled over the cliff. But here's the kicker. This isn't a warning. It's an invitation to look in the mirror, to see that shadow lurking behind your eyes, and to confront it before it drags you down. Zimbardo's The Lucifer Effect isn't just a book. It's a wake-up call, a slap in the face with the cold, hard truth that you're not as good, not as moral, not as invincible as you think. But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe recognizing the monster in you is the first step toward keeping it at bay, because the line between good and evil is thinner than you think, and you never know when you might find yourself on the wrong side of it.